I'm Stefan Baumann. I would like to invite you on a special journey to discover the splendor, encounter the grandeur, feel the excitement. Come along with me as we experience the thrill of painting outdoors. A 3-day journey that will change your art forever. In one of America's most stunning locations, Mount Shasta. Everything you need to know is on our website, www.stefanbaumann.com. The reason why I give homework assignments is just so that you guys don't just stand around going, what do I paint, what do I paint? But the reality is, to do anything is fine. You know, so if I tell students, oh, just go home and paint something, they spend the entire week looking for something to paint. So what I want to do is I want you to realize that you can create a composition out of nothing. Maybe a shoes, it could be buckles or watches or sunglasses that we did. We could do composition using bubble wrap. And how we do that is kind of our creativeness. Now some of you may have just put shoes on just a pair of shoes. And other people may have come up with something different, but that's kind of half the fun. And then we spend some time setting up a painting of cowboy boots, which are shoes. I don't know if anybody realized that you did shoes twice this week. But the cowboy boots kind of have a cowboy theme. And when setting up a still life, you want to set it up so that you have the best composition possible. And so I want to look at composition a little bit today and see if we can't see what other interesting things we could come up with and different things that compositions can have. Now, overall with composition, you can have like an L shape or an O shape or a V shape. You go and look at books on composition, and oftentimes what's real interesting, because the artists are always trying to make sense of what they do instinctually. So when somebody starts a class, they come to a class and they're looking for a recipe, because they're used to that. So artists have to sit there and go, how do I paint? I know when I was doing the TV show for PBS, it was like, okay, how can I formulate this? Now, when you're on PBS, you have like Bob Ross. Okay, so Bob Ross, he's got the magic brush. You start off with actually that's William Alexander, who was like, oh, the mighty paintbrush. He was the first guy. He's actually like the guy that started the whole PBS stuff. And then Bob Ross came behind him, and he was a kinder, gentler being. Everything was just a happy little. You want to see my little owl? He'd always pull out little creatures, and he'd always put happy little clouds and happy little skies and happy little. But even then, it had to be kind of laid out as a formula. And when I have students that pop into class, they're like, okay, what do I do first? And so they want kind of a formula. The problem is with art, as it is with a lot of things that people do professionally, it isn't a step-by-step process. And if you go and look at all the videotapes and you go and listen to all of the artists, all of them work that way and all of them don't. Every one of them has a different way of painting. And I look at Walter Foster books, which were really popular in the 60s and 70s. And there were these big magazine type books for $1 that you used to be able to get from Grumbacher and Winsor Newton and stuff. And there would be the process. So they would ask a famous artist, could you do a Walter Foster book? Which was good for promotion, so a lot of them did that. And some really phenomenal artists produced them. But they already had the finished painting done.
Yeah.
And then what they would do is that they would try to work it backwards. And in the process of working it backwards, they would have to sit there and go, okay, the people who are watching this don't really know anything about painting. So we'll have them start off with the sky. But when I look at the process in that book and look at their finished product, I know they didn't paint it that way.
Right.
You know, so they go backwards and they try to recreate it. And people who don't know anything about painting think, oh, all I have to do is follow a few steps and get there. I also love it when artists sit there and go, I'm going to show you the secrets behind painting. I mean, don't you think if there were really like the secrets behind painting, you'd be able to buy a book by now? Because those artists that have the secrets wouldn't necessarily hold on to them if there's money to be made. Because after all, we're all starving artists anyway.
My very first painting was from a Learn How To book. It's a Walter Foster painting.
Well, we start off in this
I
class.
still have it.
Yeah, but we start off in this class when students come in, but I don't have them look at all the how-to part of it, but those paintings that were in the Walter Foster books were great. And if you're just starting off painting, they're absolutely great to copy. They're wonderful sources. So it's a wonderful source to get, but don't look at their instructions because they'll confuse you. Nobody painted them that way. A lot of people ask me, so how did you start that painting? And I go, I don't know. I can't remember. Because I just jump in. And when you jump in, you're working with lights and shadows and this. And when I watch, the great thing about Facebook is that you get to watch a lot of artists paint. And a lot of times they're just painting and you get to watch them. But a lot of times you sit there and I look at some artists and they start from the left-hand corner and they literally will finish the painting as they go down. I mean, I'm like, oh my God. And that can only really be done if you actually have a photograph or something that you're copying. I mean, if you're creating something out of your mind, you kind of have to know how this whole surface looks. So if you work it like piece by piece down by this, I mean, that's a possible way of working, but you have to kind of almost be committed to either a photograph or a sketch that you've already done. I like laying a painting and all in at one time. Becky, she started in with her painting last week. She just went crazy. She got that entire canvas covered in 2 hours. Remember? Mm-hmm. Absolutely beautiful. So then I came back to her and I said, so I was watching her. Actually, I came back and I was watching you paint. And I'm like going, and she started again from the top, from the bottom. And some artists like to do that. They start from the top and they work down. It's kind of the same. So I throw in everything into a painting because I have to know what it's like. And one of the most important things to me is to cover that white surface. That white canvas is usually the thing that's going to bug you the most. Those artists that work from left to right or right from left, depending on if they're right-handed or left-handed, because think about it. If you're right-handed, you start here, you can rest your hand on the canvas. Yeah. Okay. If you're left-handed, you want to go this way. So you rest your hand on the canvas. But the problem with that is that that big white canvas is not making it able to see all the color relationships on everything that you've painted so far. So you literally have to cover that whole white surface to actually see the colors that are happening. Because everything that you do on the painting is relative to everything else that's on the painting. So my thing is to cover the whole painting to begin with. Now, some of the biggest questions that I have is, do you stain a canvas before you paint on it? And some artists do, and some artists don't. There again, too, there's no rule behind that.
Which benefits you better?
Wouldn't you like to know? Which benefits you the most? That's what everybody wants to know. Is there a secret behind that? And if you stain a canvas and then you paint loose and you don't cover the canvas all the way, that would be beneficial. But if you're one of these type painters that paints from left to right and you're covering all of that, Oil paints are very opaque. And so that brown surface that you have underneath really won't add anything to the final painting. It won't bleed through. Your paint will actually cover that. You know, you're forgetting that paints are like house paint. And when you go in and you have a green room and you go in and you want to paint it white, you don't want that green to show up. You know, so paint, especially oil paints, are very opaque, so they cover what it is that you put onto them. So if you have the base color brown and you start painting that way, it all covers up. It doesn't have you have the white to compare to. But for me, it's not offering anything else. So what I like to do is take the base color and do something with it. So that's where I do my sketch. And oftentimes I'll use ultramarine blue and asphaltum, or ultramarine blue and burnt umber, or ultramarine blue. And why do I do with ultramarine blue and brown? It's because you can get black that way. So you can go black, you can go brown. You have the blue, so you can get some blue in there. You can actually put a base in for your sky. You start laying the painting in a way so that you have something to work from. And while it's wet, you can grab a paper towel with a little turpentine on it and wipe off the highlights. So you have some idea of where the painting's going to go. And when all that's in, you can step back and say, is that really what I want? If you lay in a painting all together and you go in and you start wiping off the highlights, you have somewhere you go. And if you're working with darks and lights and you kind of are free with working that base color, you actually start loosening up. And you realize, oh, this is not that important. Now, one of the things that people ask me the most is like, how do I get that loose quality? How do I make my paintings feel loose? Well, one good way is that you really don't care about it. And you really don't care about it in the sketch process. You can kind of be like, it doesn't matter, it's going to be covered up. But if you start off freely with the sketch and you start putting in darks and lights, don't use any whites, just basically ultramarine blues, browns, and a paper towel and turpentine. And you paint it on like a watercolor, and you use the white surface to help wipe off. You can start actually getting the effect of light through in your sketch, and then you can just step back and look at it. If you're painting from left to right and go through your painting that way, you won't know if your decisions of where you're placing things on the canvas was a good idea. I mean, granted, you can look at the photograph and say, yeah, that's good, but oftentimes when we put paint on the canvas, we get other ideas. And I'm one of these guys that you have to know what you want to paint before you start. But there's a point in painting that your genius pops up. And things start to happen in a painting that are uncontrollable. And you get different ideas. You know, what's good on Thursday might not be good on Friday. Sometimes I'll work on a painting for a week and go, why did I even choose this? You know, I don't like this at all. What seems like might be a good idea, and you start painting it from a photograph, if you're painting from left to right, oh my God, you work 6 months on a painting, you're this far, and then all of a sudden you realize, I don't know if I like this painting anymore. Plus also, every aspect of this part of the painting gets way overworked. Now remember, the central focal point in a painting is where we have the most detail. So if you're going to do a portrait, the center focal point would be the eye. So we want to put highlights and shadows on the eye. Now if we lay everything in very quickly, and we go in and we start developing the eye area, and we work out, and that's what I was telling you today. Start from the center focal point, and you're doing a waterfall. Start where the light is hitting the water. Don't start from the top. If you start from the top of the painting, you overwork everything. If you start with a portrait, and some artists are this way, do the eyes last. And I say do the eyes first and work out. Because if there's a problem, you don't have everything to correct. I mean, imagine if the head is out of proportion. And you go in and you wait with the eyes, you wait with the eyes, you wait with your eyes. Then you're stuck with the head and the eyes and trying to fit them in that head.
And like that, in a portrait, everything measures off of the eyes.
Yeah, you kind of measure this to this.
This to that.
that to that. I mean, I use these as the measurement where this is, because that oftentimes will find measurements, you know, within this whole space in here. And then you go in and once you set those eyes in there, the face doesn't move. You get those 2 points in there and boom, that starts your face right there.
Keeps the angle too.
And you keep you start gearing your angle and everything off of the eye. But, and then so when you have a portrait, you go through and paint it very quickly, paint, you know, brown stuff, wipe around the face and the nose and all that and get into the eye. And then start painting the eye and work out. With you, it's a waterfall. With the lights hitting the waterfall, work out. And as you're working out, you start filling in more and more of the face. And as you're filling it in, you're like thinking, oh, I kind of like the lapel a little suggestive over here. And I don't need to paint all of this stuff in the background. You know, I can just put some lights and shadows in and just those few little brush strokes that you started off with as a sketch may lead to something in the background that you didn't even foresee. There are some artists out there who paint from photographs fabulously. Like I said, there was one artist who called me from Australia. I mean, amazing, amazing painter. When I looked him up, I said, that's you? Because I recognized his work. And he was asking for coaching. And, you know, one of the issues that I have with that is that you're only as good as your next photo. You have nothing to contribute except the person who's taken the photograph. And then you're stuck. You have no artistic interpretation. And where does artistic interpretation lie? It lies in the right brain. The left brain knows everything. It's like a camera. It takes pictures and has opinions about things. But the right brain floats out there and makes teddy bears out of clouds. It sees patterns in marble and says, oh, look, a face. So once you start putting some shapes and forms on a canvas, and you start developing outward from the center focal point, all of a sudden you start seeing things happen if you're awake. You start seeing things happen that changes the whole direction of the painting. And it becomes an art piece, not just a recreation piece. Oftentimes I'll have a bear that's just sitting on the land and I'll go, this is kind of dull. So then all of a sudden I'll change the land into a waterfall. It's a little more exciting. But a photographer, somebody who sits there and copies a photograph and then hits the bear, they're so tied to the subject that they can't move it. They can't change it. I mean, I've taken from the very beginning and thought, oh, that really wasn't a good place for that animal. So I'll move it to the left or the right. It's a lot better to do that when I don't have 3 weeks into the painting. Start your painting off very, very loose. And then work from the center focal point out. And see if you can retain some of the original sketch, and your paintings will start loosening up some. Kind of as part of the key. Stuff like feet and arms and stuff can be done very loosely and stuff. But the key is when you're laying the painting out, stay loose, then start off with the center focal point and work out. Try to see that your original sketch that you have is loose to begin with. So you see artists like Richard Schmidt, they start off with a really broad, loose, cover the canvas, and oftentimes a lot of that stuff still shows up at the very end. Or a lot of times it will kind of spur you to think, oh, that little brushstroke over there is a perfect place to put another stem for a rose. And if you start off at the very beginning of the painting with an abstract, that's when it's fun. It's like you just take a paper towel and you just kind of like scribble with the paper towel and then throw some turpentine on it, let it drip and wipe it off. And then put your sketch on top of that and leave some of that showing through. It's not a good idea to leave blank canvas though. You want to stain the canvas with something at some point, not just have this zigzag and then paint on top of it. The whole idea is to try to get rid of the white canvas to begin with. And then once that canvas is covered, then you work on from that. So that's a valuable place. But you don't need to start off a painting like that either. A lot of people who watch my television show, they go, there must be a reason why you stain your canvases and you never talk about it. All of your canvases that you start on your TV show and we watch you paint, you've stained the canvas first with brown. So that must be a secret. You've never addressed it. It's one of those artistic secrets. I know it is. If I would just stain the canvas first, I could paint like you. And I go, you know why we stain our canvas? And they go, why? What's the secret? I go, I'll tell you. It's because digital cameras don't like white canvases. They can't zoom on it. So my cameraman said, you've got to stain that canvas because the camera can't focus on the white. Has nothing to do with painting at all. So everybody thinks, oh, that's some hidden secret. He's not talking about it, it must be hidden. But really, that's why you see the stained canvases behind me. But I've also incorporated the stained canvases. But sometimes I paint just on white itself. Someone have a question here?
Yeah, that was me. The problem I have with what you're talking about, starting out loose and then going back, is particularly in an all prima situation, paint gets too thick. And so, in the beginning, you think should we start out with thinner paint?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end,
You go thicker and thicker. And that's another problem too that I have students who start off with. You know, that I start off with, and they'll start putting in paint. Because, I mean, you know, oil paints, which are really fabulous, but part of oil painting is that you get a sculpt with oils. You know, a lot of people miss that thing, is that just the application of oils. I mean, that's why we love to look at Rembrandt's paintings, because not only are they beautiful lighting effects, but there's wonderful textual paint application. Palette knife and smudging and fingers and depths. Some of Rembrandt's paintings are 1/4 of an inch thick in the highlight thing. So oil paints, you can do that. That's the wonderful thing about it. But there is a process. If you start putting palette knife on your painting at the beginning, you're going to end up with problems. So you start off with thin paint. You paint like a watercolorist at first. I think that's why a lot of oil painters are such good at watercolors, because they do kind of a watercolor issue. You know, if you study watercolors, you're pretty much stuck with watercolors. And if you paint with pastels, or you start off with pastels, you're pretty much stuck with pastels. You still have to learn watercolors. You still have to learn oils. If you learn acrylics, you still have to learn oils. So the medium to learn is oil paints, because oil paint is very flexible. It's like learning the piano. Once you learn the piano, a lot of that information you can use for other instruments. Oil painting is kind of the foundation that everything kind of grows up out of. And if you become really good at oil painting, you can use that knowledge to do watercolor, acrylics, pastels, anything you want in that base. And the process with painting is that you work from thin to thick. Always start off with a thin wash and, like I say, wipe off the highlights and go thicker. Now, to create highlights onto an oil painting, you want to apply the paint really thick. The thicker the paint, the brighter it appears. So you're working towards dark, towards light.
Like watercolor, you work
From-
lights first.
Except my students don't. My students that I coach that do watercolors, they learn to go dark really quick. Because when you look at watercolors that are done like Sargent, his watercolors have that wonderful dark color to them. And the problem with watercolors, if you don't get there fast enough, the watercolor paper will only absorb so much.
Right.
And then it doesn't get any darker. So I have my watercolor students start off very dark. I go, just get it in there, don't be afraid of it. Mix it so that it's really thick. Don't use so much water, and just put it down. That's how Sargent did. That was the secret behind his watercolors. It's not to, work it up a little tiny washes.
You gotta really plan where your lights are going to be.
Well, you have to have a vision, you know? And you have to have the freedom of knowing that you can't make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, no, but the thing is with watercolors, see, that's the thing, everybody goes, well, watercolors are so much more harder than oils. And it's like, no, they're not. You just have to know what you do with them. When they start sliding into the wrong area, you just go darker. And then the darker you make your watercolors, the better they are. I mean, my watercolor students that I do with coaching, I have quite a few watercolor students that I do with coaching. I have them start pretty dark and they go, well, I can't go any darker. And I go, yes, you can. I said, you're only a third of the way there. And then the following week they go, how's that? And I go, you're still not dark enough. They don't even know what dark looks in watercolor. But if you look at Sargent, you see that really depth quality. And you can do that at the beginning part of your painting too. Get those darks in there because you're not going to get lights. And we paint with light. We don't paint things. In order to get light, you have to have shadow. Shadow is the key to everything. And you're not going to get shadow if it's not in front of you. You have to set it up like that. You can't rely on a good photograph to be perfect. And you wouldn't want to. And you want your painting to be free with no outcome at the end. And sometimes with watercolors, it doesn't let you do that either because you start off with that drawing and then you're thinking, oh, I got to keep my darks in this corner. And then you kind of labor to that. But what if the darks just kind of start disappearing? Then you just move everything to a darker surface. You just get darker, darker, darker. You keep digging in. The more dark you get in there, the more beautiful the watercolor becomes. The more you start off a painting with thin paint and you get to the darkers quicker, the light starts to pop. So the problem with your painting at this point with the waterfall is that you don't have enough darks in to get that light to show, because right now the light isn't showing very well. So you see we have to darken, and then what we could say is that your initial sketch you did last week wasn't dark enough.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm putting darks in now.
Yeah. But see, you should have gone dark, dark last week in that phase. But you don't know it till you blow it.
Yeah, I was just forming it.
Yeah. But even then, so that's where you want it. I mean, you did a beautiful job last week, but you weren't dark enough.
Right.
You know, we're kind of fearful of going dark. But you don't know it till you blow it. Now you realize, God, I got to get darker because the lights don't really show. The thing that's missing in here is the effect of light. Where's your central focal point?
Don't have one.
You don't have one. So what do you have? A painting of shoes. Do you honestly think in this world do people need a painting of shoes? No. So when you set up your still life, you want to make sure that you have the effect of light. How do you get the effect of light? You got to have shadows. You really have to kind of think about shadows and lights. And this is just way too flat.
I did it without a light. I just did it from the light from the window.
Yeah, that's what most people do. But if you don't direct the viewer to a central focal point, the painting just becomes of a thing. Nobody needs a painting of shoes anymore. And then if you're not inspired, obviously,
Well, I
nobody else is
couldn't figure out
either.
what I was doing.
Those shoes were not made for walking. We have kind of a fairly flat area. I mean, it's beautiful and the contrasts are good. But I guess the center focal point would be the light on here. But the thing is, there's not a lot of difference between this and that. You know, this shoe should have gone into shadow.
And it wasn't, I set it up that way, I probably didn't paint it dark enough.
Quite dark enough.
Yeah.
So this, and the thing is, what you want is a transition. Because you have a little bit of light here, which is kind of nice. But you really want to go from dark to light. Because one important thing about working with light, which a lot of people don't get, is that it's just not the light on there. Because light by itself, and it just hits there, bink, like that, there's no energy. And if you kind of look at a space, you know, they talk about light years. It takes like 30,000 light years for a star to throw its light till we actually see it. And oftentimes the light that we see from a star is from a star that no longer exists. Isn't that weird?
That's wonderful.
So you've got light traveling, it's like someone went, you know, and it's traveling and the light's no longer there. So it's this energy that's moving. When you think about that in a painting, it's about light traveling. You think about light being an energy. And so in order to get energy into your light, you want to have transitions. Transitions give us the energy. So the darker you do this side of the shoe, the brighter in this transition. That transition is really key to help push that light. If you start off with shadow and go to light, any direction, light to dark to light. If you think that every square inch of your painting, you either go in value, temperature, try to change the light in some way, that gives momentum. The shorter the distance, the more energy the light has. So you're trying to give energy to the light by forming some transition. This would have been darker into the light. And you can kind of see if we take this down and focus the light, you know, you can kind of see with the light turned down on there, the shoe kind of comes out, and it's much more eye-catching that way. And we no longer are really concentrating on the shape of the shoes anymore. We're really concentrating on how the shoe is lit. And that's done through the transition. That's the key. Beautiful job. So, you know.
Oh, and closer.
Yeah, so like you can narrow this down like this, right? But then if you go closer to your still life, you can get a little bit more of a pinpoint. So.
Wow.
So the thing is, what's missing in your painting, though, the thing that's missing in your painting is that. You see how that's lit? You don't quite have that energy in there, that light.
Yeah.
Because-
As soon as I saw it, I thought that was missing, yes.
And so, you know, again, usually to catch their attention, why do we do the light? Is because you've got a lot of shoe paintings here. You've got to stand out. If you're in a gallery, if you don't stand out, they're not interested in selling your work. You've got to pop off the wall and make everybody else look like they need to be watching some videos on YouTube.
Make yours stand out above everybody else's.
Yeah, yeah, and you only do that with light. It's the only tool you have, color and light. And so here, the issue is that where's your central focal point?
It's behind the shoe on the right.
Behind. This one?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so the center focal point should be within the middle third.
Well, you told me that it should be the opposite of where the light's coming.
Which way is the light coming from?
It's coming from the left. And
Okay,
when I
so
did
the
this-
central focal point should be in the middle third on the object to the right. If the light's coming this way, your central focal point should be in the middle and on here. And furthermore, that's the angle of the light. See the angle of the shoe is this way so that the light's hitting this. That angle is like this. Vertical is not going to catch the same light as that. See vertical? Vertical? Anything that's at the same angle that the light is, that's going to be your brightest point, right there. The vertical isn't going to get the same kind of light.
But I thought that was in the upper third going this way.
If that's that,
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, no, it's not though.
Okay.
You know, it's a bit high. And furthermore, I mean, did anybody actually see that corner up there? I mean, do you actually agree? It's like, you know, we're really caught up on here. I would like to have seen the boots on hay and on wood and in a barn with rats and things like that, you know,
I can still change it. You
Yeah.
know, I knew I needed to work
yeah.
on that.
So the thing is, though, having this soft blanket in there, it's not reading like these are old farm shoes. That's why I said you could instantly change the story to booties and, you know, this is, you know, these moccasin booties that you wear when it gets really cool. Because they kind of look like that. But the thing is, it's because of this blanket in the setting. But you put kind of a 4x4 behind there with hay, it's going to start looking like an old dried out boot.
Oh, okay.
So the setting is everything. If you notice what we painted today, the background, I had kind of something that looked like burlap, and then we had that piece of burlap in front. Because old cowboy boots, you know, kind of hang out in barns. We wouldn't want to put them in a really beautiful, pristine area. And the thing is, your light isn't bright enough. Especially, I mean, you know, if you look at this and then look at that angle. That's the same angle that the light is coming in. See, so that's a direct.
Can you zero it
Mm-hmm.
in? Can you zero it in?
Yeah, I will.
Like
But then just get ready to be wowed. Because you're gonna have, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the finger of God. We're going to put a beam of light in here.
Okay, now I'm gonna get a picture.
Now look at that. So what we have is the light coming through, hitting this and hitting that.
I don't want to be on your TV show.
It bounces. Well, the energy that comes in,
Huh?
the energy that comes in, it hits like bing, and then bing, 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 bing. It bounces. That's why when light hits this, it hits this. But look at, see how I've got all this on shadow? And look at that beautiful light coming in. See, now what you have to say is this a painting about shoes? Yes.
Or about light.
Or is it about the light coming in on the shoes? And that's really the secret. If there is a secret for painting, it has nothing to do with painting, it has to do with light. Light is the secret to painting. I mean, that's pretty much it. and then you paint what you see. But you got to set it up like that. But you always got to be thinking about the next level of liking. If you'd like to try coaching for yourself, whether you're a beginner or an advanced painter, please don't hesitate to give me a call at 415-606-9074. Join us on our website at www.thegrandview.org and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting.